Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, thank you. That's perfect. It's been about 12 years since I've been in a classroom, so it's really good for me to hear that again. Can we say it again? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Perfect. Very good. I'm Kirsten Baszler. I'm the State Superintendent for the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. As I just mentioned, this is my 12th year in office. I was elected the first time in 2012, re-elected again in 2016 and in 2020. See some familiar faces in the room. I see lots of new faces in the room. I'm really happy to see all of you. How many new board members do we have? Oh my goodness, a large majority. Thank you. So, little known fact, or maybe not so little known to those that know me well, prior to me being elected as the state superintendent, I was working for Bismarck Public Schools for the majority of my career. I had a 23, almost 24-year career with Bismarck Public Schools. I started as a teacher's aide and then became a classroom teacher, a library media specialist, worked for the district office in district technology integration, and then eventually became an assistant building principal in Bismarck while I still remained in the classroom. But while I was doing that in Bismarck for nearly 24 years, I was raising my 3 children over in the Mandan School District right across the river, and became very involved in my community just because that's the way that I was raised, that's the way my mother and father raised me, and all of my community volunteering and work on the library board and the economic development board led me to, once my oldest son was a freshman in high school, I had twin sons, his younger brothers, that were still in elementary school, but I had experienced every level of the Mandan school system as a parent, as a constituent, as a taxpayer, and I ran for the Mandan School Board. So I served on that Mandan School Board for nearly a decade. I was a member for 9 years, and I was president of that board for 7 of those 9 years. And this is Dale Wetzel. Dale is our public information officer. And so he does this often at the beginning, so we'll just photos. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So now I'm just really
Doesn't last long.
Okay. It's painless too, sometimes. I served in that capacity for 9 years. In fact, I had a dual role. I was elected in November of 2012, as I mentioned, and I was still serving on the Mandan School Board. So January of 2013, when I was sworn in, I would be at the office all day on the 11th floor of the Capitol and be working with legislators on policy. And every, the second and fourth Monday of every week, I would hop in my car at 10 minutes to 5 and chase across the bridge and sit for my Mandan School Board meetings until my term ran out in June of 2013. And so it was during that time that I really understood, as I said, I had been a classroom teacher, a teacher's aide, a building principal, district office in technology integration, but it wasn't until my time that I served on the Mandan School Board that I realized just how critical policy and appropriation was to making sure that our students succeeded. It was at that moment that truly prepared me in the best possible way to become the state superintendent of public instruction. When I first was elected to the Mandan School Board, Mandan was among our Class A school districts in the state, was among the poorest performing on every metric that you could see. It's because adults were fighting, big people were fighting with each other. And that's where I came up with the slogan, when big people fight, little people suffer. And we were so consumed with so many adult issues and adult fights that we forgot the reason that we had run for school board. We forgot the reason that public schools existed. And that was to ensure that our students were receiving the instruction and the support that they needed in order to be successful after high school. And so during that stint, I had formed a really great partnership. I was very active in the North Dakota School Boards Association, had served on the board of directors for that, and got engaged on the regional level and the national level of the School Boards Association. And I will tell you when I was elected in June, my first year of office for the school board work, we had a summer meeting. We had a July summer meeting where the School Boards Association brought all new board members and sometimes veteran board members. And we had our first reorganizational meeting in July, and then I went to the training and I realized, oh, I have so much to learn about what this role entails and how I can be most helpful. But for various reasons, even when I was on the board of directors, the association decided to stop having that July meeting and just consolidate it to the October meeting that I hope you all attend in Bismarck coming up, or have attended if you're a veteran board member. And because of the close relationship that I had with the School Boards Association prior to being elected as a state superintendent, I wanted to continue that relationship. I knew how important it was. Fast forward the 9th year, or actually the 8th year that I was on the Mandan School Board, because of very intense work that we did as 9 school board members, Mandan went from the poorest performing, the lowest performing school district in the state, to the highest performing for our high schools among Class A school districts, except one school, high school, beat us in the science metric and our science scores for 10th and 11th graders. That school was Century High School in Bismarck. And if any of you know the demographics of Mandan versus Bismarck, Century High School, you can tell that you know that there's significant different things. And so that was my proof positive, my evidence that when school boards actually focus on the work that they do for school children and leave all of that other stuff that we can get sucked into and take our focus off of how are our students doing. Are they reading at 3rd grade level? Are they doing math at 8th grade level? Are they graduating from high school choice ready? Meaning the skills, the knowledge, and the disposition to do anything that they choose to do, whether it's college, military, or work right away. Is that what we're focused on as a board? So I went to my friend and partner at the School Boards Association and said, hey, can we bring back a summer thing? And really, when I was on the board of directors, it was a cost. It was a cost associated with it. You had to rent hotel rooms, you had to pay speakers, and when we started working through that, it's like, well, wait, if we partner on this, we can use a room at the Capitol. We don't have to pay a hotel room. We don't have to pay any meeting room rental fees. Because we have so many experts at the Department of Public Instruction and at the North Dakota School Boards Association, we don't need to pay any experts to come in. We can just convene those school board members. We can allow them an opportunity. And when I was walking down the hall today and I said saw that it was the 6th annual, I was like, wow. That struck me. It's like, yeah, we've been doing this for 6 years. And
I actually was counting on my fingers as I went.
Really?
I didn't think it could be 6, but 6 was right.
It is. So we've gotten better. We'll ask you for your opinion on this, to give you opportunities. We just are here simply to do 2 things: to provide you information, but to also provide you with faces and people that are here to help you ask the questions that you need to ask in order to help your students be successful in your school districts. Because none of you ran for this job for the fame or the glory or the pay. You certainly didn't say, I want to go knock on doors and run a campaign. Some of you maybe even woke up the next morning and didn't realize that you were going to be a school board member, but suddenly you had the most write-in votes on your school district's election. But for whatever reason that brought you here, I promise you, it is a job that I miss every day. Even at the state capitol, the work that you get to do that is so close to the students and those students' families. And on graduation day, when you are there, I hope you all go to your graduation ceremonies in May, but you'll see kids that are soaring across that stage. And you'll see kids that were pushed, pulled, and drug across to get to that stage by their family, their teachers, their administrators, and their community. And you'll know that you had a direct role in all of those scenarios. So thanks for spending your time with us today. It's going to be a pretty casual occurrence. We have going to be sharing a lot of information with you. If you want any of this in a direct or an electronic form, we'll be passing around this sheet. Please just share your email address with us and we'll get all of the materials that we are going through today on PowerPoint and digital format to you in an electronic version as well. So thanks. And with that, she is my calming partner. So Alexis is my calming partner. I've known her for over a decade now. And she didn't come to us by the way of education, but I was a strong supporter of hers when she decided she might want to do this work, and I remain an even stronger supporter of her. Sometimes I get a little amped up. I was an elementary teacher. I raised 3 boys. I can go from 0 to 100 in less than 3 seconds when it concerns things that have to do with students' future and their success. Alexis calms me down and makes me step back and say, let's think about this pragmatically. We've got 169 school boards out there. How can we make sure we're serving all of their needs? And I'm like, okay, take a beat, take a breath. So Alexis, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, 2 things. I'm going to call my husband and tell him that he said I was calling something. So
Okay.
that 2, I seem to recall it was your idea, so thanks for that. But yes, as Kirsten said, my name is Alexis Baxley. I am the Executive Director of the School Boards Association, which you are now a member of as a school board member. All 170 districts in the state of North Dakota are members of the School Boards Association by choice. We exist to serve you. So the School Boards Association provides resources, training like this today, legal services, policy services, all sorts of different things to help you as school board members be the best that you can possibly be for your districts, for your students. So we have a staff of 6, myself included. We are based here in Bismarck. And we are available during the week to assist in any way you might need assistance. So I have Taylor in the back. She didn't know I was going to call on her. She is our membership and marketing director. I kind of say she is your kind of chief liaison. So if you have something you need help with, she might not be the first voice on the phone, but she might be kind of your chief detective in figuring out who can help you and what we need to do. You will meet Amy a little bit later. She is our general counsel. You might, hopefully not, but you might probably spend the most time talking to her if you have legal questions or things like that. And then we have a few other gals in the office working on policy, working with your business managers, things like that. So we are excited. If you're new, we're excited to have you join us. If you're a veteran, we're happy you're here today. As Kirsten said, we used to do this July meeting. We kind of stopped, we came back, or July, summer, August. It's tough to get people in North Dakota to come and learn in August. It's really nice outside. So kudos to you for taking a Monday to come spend it with us in the Capitol instead of at the lake or whatever other fun things you guys do in the summer. So we are excited to spend the day. I'm appreciative to Kirsten and her team for putting together a great agenda for us. And if you have any questions throughout the day, as Kirsten said, we are very, very casual. So if you want to raise your hand, raise your hand. Kirsten's a better teacher than I am. She'll probably call on you. You can just shout it out at me. I will just take them as we go, certainly. But also if you have questions afterwards, I think that we have business cards somewhere in the back maybe. So if you don't feel comfortable asking today and you want to track us down and ask questions later, or grab us during a break in the back. Again, School Boards Association exists to serve you in your role as a board member. So give me a call tomorrow, next week, whatever. We will spend some time later today going through the resources that we have available for you, and we're always happy to chat. So.
I failed to mention our team, that you met Dale already. Dale's our public information officer. He also does a lot of research. He is a former Associated Press writer. He covered the government beat of the political beat at the Capitol for over 20, I always ask you this, 25 years, 28 years?
28.
28 years. And then came, I say that all of the other elected officials should give me like some commission for taking him off the beat of working on their stories. But no, he has become a huge advocate for education and is one of our biggest assets. In the back of the room, we have standing Bob LaFavor. He will help us with all things technical today. Jill Schwab is our executive staff officer in the black and white. You'll receive information from her from our department and doing things. And then Donna Fishbeck, also at the back table. Wave, this is a funny story. I started out in like getting to know the school district where my children were going to school. So my hometown is Flasher, and I raised my boys in Mandan. And so we started out together. There was a brand new elementary school called Fort Lincoln Elementary in Mandan. And the first year that it opened, my oldest son was a kindergartner, and they didn't have a PTO, so we started a PTO. Donna was the vice president of the PTO at Fort Lincoln when I was the president. And then I ran for the Mandan School Board, and then she ran after me. When I was president, she was vice president. So she has over a decade of school board experience as well, and now she's the chief of staff deputy at the school, at the Department of Public Instruction. So lots of commitment to school board work. There's a team of us. There's 72 small, we are a small but mighty team of former teachers, school administrators, district leaders that work at the Department of Public Instruction now. And actually we have a current school board member on staff as well. Amanda Peterson was recently joined the Bismarck Public School District Board, and so she's a current school board member. So lots of connection to you all. I think we will start now with just what we want to do is do an update, and I think Amy is here from the School Boards Association. I'm sure you've all been very much aware of what happened in the North Dakota legislature. So for some of the newer board members, you probably weren't as aware of paying as close attention. But what we wanted to do here is kind of provide a hybrid. Inform you of what happened in the 2023 session that changed for school districts in the state and or school boards, and then provide you an update because there's a lot of work that is done from the time that the legislature adjourns to the time school starts and those laws become effective August 1st, that the School Board Association does to make life easier for its board members. So, Amy.
Yeah, so just want to again introduce Amy DeCook. Amy is our general counsel, also assists with lobbying, is, I kind of say, the brains behind our lobbying operation. So we wanted to today, when we started talking about legislative impacts, especially for those of you that have been board members before and have seen our legislative wrap up, read the legislative updates, right? You already know which bills have passed. So we wanted to be a little bit forward looking and talk mostly about how life is going to be different moving forward. So we're mostly today going to focus on things that will be different for you this school year, this board cycle compared to last board cycle due to the legislative impacts. So a couple of things that are going to be new for you in your board member role in regards to board meetings. Those changes include providing a Pledge of Allegiance or an opportunity to say the Pledge of Allegiance at your board meeting. So Amy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is for board members only, right? Your agenda must include that the board has the opportunity to say the Pledge of Allegiance. You don't have to require that the staff or that the audience say the Pledge of Allegiance. You don't have to require that the board say the Pledge of Allegiance, but you must provide an opportunity. That is new. So your agenda will look a little different. If you're a new board member, you won't know any different, but you need to note that on your agenda. We also have a new requirement regarding recording regular meetings. In the past, you've had to record executive session always. Now, if a resident of your district requests 7 days prior, you have to record any regular meeting or special meeting.
Yep.
The slide is wrong. It's regular or special, but they must give you 7 days notice. It can be audio, it can be video, your preference. And then you have to post it on your website. We do have some policy updates to help with this. Your staff likely has received those from us already, so you can get further details there. We also have a handout in your packet that kind of dives into some of those details and gives you policy references. But just know that if you have somebody who is in your district requesting that you record board meetings, you don't have the opportunity to say no to that like you maybe used to. And then for the first time, we have campaign finance requirements for school board members. This doesn't, or school board candidates. This doesn't apply to everyone. It only applies to candidates in districts with enrollments of 1,000 or greater. But if that is you, take note of that. And you'll want to look into that. We are doing a brunch and learn, which we'll introduce you to a little bit later today if you're a new board member, but we do a free monthly webinar. And we have Leanne Oliver from the Secretary of State's office coming in to do training on campaign finance. So Some changes for finance and operations. Amy, do you want to cover these?
Sure. So the first one we have there is called the School District Credit Enhancement Program. And basically there's, the legislature added a provision that says it provides an opportunity for school districts to get a better credit rating, if you basically subject your state aid payments to pullback if you are defaulting on your financial obligations. This is a program that's existed before. It allowed other revenue sources to be clawed back if a district defaulted on their payments. So it adds state aid payments, your student aid per pupil payments as part of that program. It just allows districts to get a better bond rating and lower interest rates. So that was something that they added. The general fund balance moratorium. So some of you new folks may not have dug into your budgets too much yet, but basically there's provisions in the law that restrict how much you can carry over on in your general fund from year to year without getting basically your state aid payments withheld. Last session, not this last session, but the session before, they put a moratorium on that general fund limitation. They extended that another biennium, so we don't have to worry about that. It was put in place to allow some of those federal dollars that we got for COVID relief. The ESSER dollars allowed districts to be able to spend those wisely without having to worry about those general fund limitations every July 1st. Communication of property tax levies in dollars. So if you guys have gotten your property tax statements and they talk about mill levies, those are kind of hard for folks to understand, even for us that live in school board, school district finance. It's hard to explain to voters and the community what a mill levy is. And so the legislature is requiring school districts, when they communicate with the public, to communicate mill levies in dollars rather than in mills, because it's easier for community members to understand what the actual impact might be to their property taxes. The poly-sub audit requirements. So basically this just changes when you have to get an audit, a full-blown audit every 2 years. It raises the level. Basically, it allows more districts to just submit financial statements every year to the state auditor rather than going through a full-blown audit every 2 years.
And then operations, this would just be if you were working on a large-scale construction project. CMAR is an acronym for Construction Management at Risk, which is one of a school district's options for how you bid a construction project. We just have some changes to the notice and publication requirements for how you go about bidding that project. So your business manager is likely going to be very familiar with that. I don't want to kind of trouble you with the details for that, but just know that if you are kind of starting down that path, that there have been some changes to that process that I want you to be aware of so that you bid it appropriately. Okay, some changes regarding personnel. Amy, how about I'll cover licensure and PD. You want to do compensation and contracts? Okay, so we recently mandated training for mandated reporters. Did I get that right? That's a lot of mandateds in there. So essentially, anyone who is a mandated reporter has to go through this professional development on an annual basis. Additionally, in kind of contrast to that first mandate, we did regain some local control over the rest of the professional development that you do for your staff. Prior to that, there were some state requirements on certain topics that had to be done for a certain number of hours every year or two. This session, the legislature went, you know what? We know that the board knows best what topics their staff, their district needs most, And so we've regained that. You can now choose, in order to meet the hourly requirements of PD, you get to choose the topic. So we're excited about that change. And then
What's PD?
Great
Professional development.
question. Yes, professional development. Education, maybe as much as the military, is a world of acronyms and jargon, and if you are new to it, there's a lot to learn. So yes, please stop if I ever kind of rush through an abbreviation.
I have one more question.
Yes.
What's a mandated reporter?
So a mandated reporter, anyone, a teacher, your superintendent, there are lots of individuals deemed mandated reporters, but essentially what it is, if you are someone who is in a position deemed a mandated reporter, you are by law required to report suspected child abuse, child neglect. Your position mandates that you report certain situations like that to child services, law enforcement, etc. Okay, and then the community expert permit expansion. So we have a type of teacher licensure that we kind of colloquially, I am struggling with words today, it's Monday, refer to as a community expert. And what we mean by that is there's someone who was not necessarily trained as a teacher in college, but they maybe received a degree in another field, they practiced in another field, and then a district was unable to find a teacher in a particular area. And I'll use science as an example. Perhaps a district was unable to find a science teacher, but they had a chemist who worked in an environmental lab in town who was looking maybe for a fresh start somewhere else. And so they talked that chemist into coming and working as a teacher. And so there's kind of an alternative licensure for that chemist that we have within code that we call the community expert. And you're only allowed to work under that licensure for a certain period of time. This session we expanded it to allow you to work for another 3 years if during that period of licensure you went, you know what, this gig's pretty cool, I want to keep being a teacher, and so you started pursuing an education to become a regularly licensed teacher. So we're essentially allowing you to continue to work under that community expert license so long as you are pursuing the requirements under a regular licensure, the educational requirements. Amy?
So these next two relate to teacher contracts. I'm guessing most of you haven't gone through a negotiation session yet with your teachers. That'll be coming up probably, maybe some next year, for sure the following year. But basically, teachers are entitled to contracts by law. With those contracts, they have what we call continuing employment rights from year to year. They're entitled to at least the same or similar contract from year to year unless they're renegotiated. So the first one, signing bonuses. Boards are restricted on how they compensate their teachers pursuant to the master contract that they negotiate with their teaching staff. So the legislature has provided some authority to boards to pay signing bonuses to essentially recruit or retain teachers. It's just another tool to deal with the teacher shortage that we've been experiencing for several years in North Dakota. So what the legislature did, they expanded the authority to offer signing bonuses. Before this last session, you could only offer essentially a brand new teacher in the state a signing bonus. They have now expanded that to offer anybody that's in a newly assigned role within your district a signing bonus. So it just gives a broader authority to give those bonuses out.
What's the cap on the sign-in bonus?
There is no cap.
No cap?
No cap, but it has to either be paid in a lump sum or in installments over a 5-year period. It used to be a 3-year period, so it's giving districts a little bit more flexibility to recruit teachers. So that was a great change. Short-term contracts. So as I said, teachers are entitled to contracts from year to year. Short-term, there's a couple of exceptions to that in the law. They added a new one this year. So anybody whose position is funded by a temporary revenue source, so a grant or some that were hired to deal with the learning loss gap from during the pandemic. The legislature has provided an exception to the continuing contract rights. Basically, you can offer a short-term contract to those folks that are filling a position funded by a temporary source. So that was a really good change for school boards as well.
Can you repeat that one more time? You can offer a short-term contract for people.
So like, let's say there's a position that's funded in a school district by a grant. That's may not be a grant that's in existence, indefinitely. And so if it's a temporary revenue source that you use to fund that position, the law allows you to offer a short-term contract, so a 1-year contract, for example. And that teacher wouldn't get those continuing contract rights. So it gives boards a little bit of flexibility to fill those positions without being tied to that teacher indefinitely. So.
Okay, here's another acronym that is loads of fun. NDPERS, so the North Dakota Public Employee Retirement System, which if you're not new, I'm sure you're very familiar with. If you're new, this is essentially, you've heard TFFR yet, which is your Teacher's Fund for Retirement. PERS is for all of your other public staff that is not licensed. You likely have heard or seen that the legislature closed the defined benefit portion of PERS this legislative session. We have probably gotten, or I feel like I have gotten more questions about what's happening with PERS since the legislative session than almost anything else. And I can't really answer those questions. I feel a little bit like we're in a holding pattern. So we just kind of wanted to provide a little bit of an update on where we're at for the moment. So, right, the legislature closed the defined benefit portion of the plan 2/3 of the way through the session. In the waning days of the session, we made a few amendments to that closure. In July, the PERS board, one of the amendments, where I say up here that they made amendments, one of the amendments was to provide kind of an optional effective date. There was a chance that the effective date, the defined benefit closure, could have happened January 1, 2024 or January 1, 2025. If you can imagine the sheer number of employees on that plan, being ready to do that in 4 months would be pretty significant. So the PERS board did vote last month that they were going to delay until January 1, 2025. They are still working out the bulk of the details. We are hoping to have folks from PERS available at our convention in October to be able to answer questions, provide some more information. We have regular meetings with our political subdivision partners that also have a large number of employees that are on PERS plans, just trying to kind of cross-reference all of our details and all of our information. And we just don't kind of have the roadmap yet for you on how that's going to look for school districts because that information is not available yet. So hence and now we wait. Yeah, question?
So what do you mean by close the defined benefit?
Yeah, so starting January 1, 2025, any employee that you hire will no longer have access to the defined benefit. So essentially PERS is a pension plan, right? So if you remember back in past times, we didn't do 401ks or defined thank you, I'm like DC, what does the C stand for? Again, Monday. We didn't do defined contribution retirement plans like we more commonly do now. We did defined benefit, aka pensions, which is what TFFR, what PERS plans are. So that is the portion of the plan that is closed. Anybody who's in already will still have that available, but new hires will not have that option. They will be going to a defined contribution plan. And that's kind of where I say, we don't know what that's going to look like. We also know that, you know, there is unfunded liability on the defined benefit side of the plan, which is why there was motivation to close it. Political subdivisions are likely going to be, definitely, are going to be on the hook for some of that unfunded liability. The House Bill 1040 included some provisions to address that unfunded liability, but not all of it. And so that's going to be some of those kind of further details, is how we'll continue to address that. And I don't think we know the full scope of that either. You know, when you start talking defined benefit, right, you don't ever know when the benefit is defined. If I live to 80 or if I live to 100, we don't know the total value of that defined benefit until the day I die. And so those calculations get difficult, and that is why finding the details and the roadmap has kind of been such a drawn-out process thus far. So more questions than answers, super helpful, I know. All right, so we wanted to spend the most time today talking about the things that are affecting students. We have a few things that kind of did my best to try to categorize these. We'll see. You can kind of grade me when I'm done here, how well you think my categories did. But I called these learning impacts, and they're maybe a little bit curriculum-y-ish. But the first one, Kirsten, do you want to talk about this? Can I pull you from the back? Do you want to talk about your computer science and cybersecurity requirements? I figured you could talk about that one off the top.
So this is 8 years in the making. I will save you the whole epic novel that I shared with the legislature as we were, as I was going down and giving everybody the history. This was 8 years in the making. So essentially, computer science, cybersecurity, graduation requirement. It is a graduation requirement for our students graduating in August of 2026. And so it is not for this year's seniors. But what is required is that the school board now should be having their team be creating an integration plan. And because that needs to be approved by you by this time next year, right? July 1st of 2024. And so that integration plan, so North Dakota became the very first state in the nation to ever have and create computer science and cybersecurity standards from kindergarten through 12th grade. First state in the nation. Other states had done grade bands for computer science or cybersecurity. Other states had done just computer science standards for their K through 12, but we became the first state to specifically say, at the end of first grade, this is what your child should know and be able to do as it relates to computer science and cybersecurity. And so please don't think when we're talking about computer science that we're putting kindergartners or first graders. Actually, almost all of the standards and all of the activities that are aligned to those standards in kindergarten, first and second, and for kindergarten, first and second grade actually are non-computer related activities. But computer science are patterns for any, I see some noddings, it's like looping and patterns and recognizing patterns. And so the way to learn the foundation of algorithms and the foundation of computational thinking that sets them up for success, fun ways like dance. Dancing is a rhythm, dancing is a pattern. And so they learn it in Fayette. They can learn it with building blocks. They learn it with moving things around. And then in third grade, they can start to do things, a pattern of how to tell the story in English language arts. Or there is the beginning and the introduction, and you set the scene, and then you introduce the characters, and then there is a conflict, and then there's a resolution of the conflict. And so those patterns that you begin to see in English language arts, also when you connect that, those are part of the standards for when you're teaching reading or you're teaching storytelling, you start to help them understand and recognize patterns that exist. And that's the foundation of computer science. And so that's the integration plan that our schools are needing to develop. Is like, where can we fit this standard into a Fayette class? Where might we be able to fit this standard into a reading or storytelling lesson? And so the school districts know clearly who the best people in their school districts are to assume that. Sometimes it might be a library media specialist, it might be a library media specialist and the music teacher, because wow, aren't there lots of patterns and foundational thinking that are related to computer science. And so the school district, the state did not want to tell them that the library media specialist is in charge of this, because holy cats, your library media specialists are already overwhelmed, as are your music teachers. There's a teaching shortage. You might not have a full-time music teacher. So the state wasn't going to tell a school district how they needed to integrate that, but the state did say, and that's the responsibility within our North Dakota Constitution, clearly gives our legislators the expectation and the responsibility to say that this is what we want our students to know and be able to do. School district board members, along with their administration team, get to decide how to do that. And so the state set the expectation that there will be computer science and cybersecurity taught at every grade level, and the school districts then, the school boards approve the plan on how to get that done.
That's effective 2025?
Correct. Yep. So actually, starting this school year,
The graduation requirement.
the graduation requirement is effective for the 25-26 school year. But this school year, your teachers, in order for your school to be approved to operate and receive public funds, you must be offering a computer science and cybersecurity course to all grade levels. And by the year 24-25 school year, your school must have an adopted integration plan that you will show as evidence, provide as evidence that you are meeting the requirements of North Dakota state law.
So the first graduating class 2026 is.
Correct, that's the May of 2026 graduates. And they can meet that graduation requirement one of two ways. They can either take a standalone computer science and cybersecurity course, or they can, and a full credit, so they can take a half a credit computer science, a half a credit of cybersecurity, or if they don't want it, if they're a band person or a CTE person, we don't want to compete, or a foreign language person, they don't have time in their schedule to take that course, either from the Center for Distance Ed or from one of your hired teachers. If they want to take other courses, that's why the integration plan is so important, is because that high school principal can say, this student was in a series of courses, freshman through senior year, where they were exposed through their integration plan to those computer science and cybersecurity courses. So that's why that integration plan is very, very important, to ensure for those students that aren't taking those independent courses, that they will still have met the requirement for graduation by being exposed to the English teacher that has taught those, the music teacher that has taught those. A lot of people, I think, incorrectly assume that the reason that we were expecting computer science and cybersecurity was because we had so many job openings. That's not the reason. We do want to prepare our students for this job, because there are thousands, or I think there are over 10,000 jobs in the state of North Dakota that have computer science related or cybersecurity related courses that are open. And fun fact for you all as parents, and some of you that are from smaller communities, so the state with the highest number of computer science or cybersecurity, or computer science related openings, which include cybersecurity, is obviously California, Silicon Valley. Guess what the second location is for the highest number of computer science related occupations?
Probably North Dakota.
Good guess. Could
Nobody
be.
wants to be here.
Could be. Remote.
Yep.
Remote. Which means that they can live anywhere. They can stay in your small communities, do farm with their family, volunteer for the firefighting department, for the EMT, raise their kids in a small town, supplement their income by never ever leaving their small community. For our reservation communities, the same thing. The opportunities are just tremendous. Have a good paying job, most of those jobs start at $70,000, and remain in your community. So, but that isn't the reason that I was a huge, you can't tell by now that I was a huge advocate of this. the reason that I was a huge advocate of this is because I get that there's more and more that is expected, but this is such a critical component of, there isn't a occupation out there, there isn't a thing out there that this doesn't touch. When your third grader starts to use your phone and clicks on things, there's an algorithm that is going on influencing what that 8-year-old third grader is going to see. It's important that our 8-year-olds understand what is happening. So just like, I'm sure the teachers in the early 20th century, 1890s, 1910s, when electricity first became common, I'm sure those teachers said, not another thing. Please don't make me teach about electricity. But electricity was the driving force behind the second industrial revolution, just like technology is the driving force behind this third revolution. And just like we don't expect, we're not teaching computer science and cybersecurity in order to make them coders or cybersecurity warriors, experts, but just like we taught our students in 5th grade, it's part of every 5th grade curriculum. We teach them about electricity because number one, it has so much power to improve our lives. It did improve our lives, but it also has so much power to do damage. And so we have to teach them about the power of good and the power of harm. And so that's why I use electricity. We added it in the early 20th century about electricity, we're adding it now. So, any questions? You should. I was good.
I did see some note taking there, so there is this in your handouts. It says legislative session general guidance at the top. It doesn't have all of the details, but it does definitely have more details than the slides do on quite a few of these topics.
Will this come out in your email too?
Say
Will this
that-
be part of the email that you guys send out?
Yeah, yep, and Taylor will also, so this actually has gone out to all of your districts already by email. If you're new, you might not have gotten it yet, but your business managers, your superintendents have it. We'll get it to you again. And then Taylor will also make all of this stuff available on our website, and we'll go out if you sign up with your email today.
I'm just going to use this as an example of the power and influence of your association.
Oh.
And no, and the reason that you should stay engaged with this association and help them help you, because as I said, this was an 8-year journey. The first time that this issue was heard was in 2019, and then in 2021, and then in a special session in 2021, and in 2023. This law that was passed is not in its original introduction. And almost no bill is ever passed the way that it was introduced. Some are, but almost none are. This bill isn't. This bill is better because of the questions that Alexis and her team asked the department and asked the legislature, and said, this is going to be a problem. How are we going to do this? Our school board members are feeling this way. And so the fact that the school board is approving the integration plan is a direct result. It used to be people at the state. Number one, we don't have people at the state that know as much as you do about your local school districts. Number two, we don't have people at the state to do this type of time-consuming work. And number three, you guys are more flexible and nimble to change that when you have a different music teacher that comes in and is no longer necessary or no longer capable or interested. So you might want to shift some of those standards to a PE teacher. So truly hard work. They actually make me work hard in order to adjust it. So, but that's only because they heard from you. So get involved, stay involved in this association.
Thank you. That was a great segue, actually, into the Learn Everywhere change. So, if you have not heard of the Learn Everywhere yet, this is a sort of, well, it's legislation that was passed a couple sessions ago, but allows your students to get credit for learning that happens outside of the school building. So maybe it's through an internship, maybe it's through a job, a sort of I'll call it an extracurricular activity that is not attached to the school. So an example a lobbyist used was strolling strings here in Bismarck, music with the Bismarck Symphony. Maybe there's a student who works part-time with the mechanic shop in your town. We know that learning is happening with all of those experiences. And so the Learn Everywhere program allows your students to get credit for that learning. What happens is that they basically, your district, your board, has to adopt a policy that says, yep, we want to participate in Learn Everywhere. We want our kids to get credit for this type of learning. 4-H is another great example. There are kids that are getting credit for the learning that happens through their participation in 4-H. Your district needs to adopt a policy, have a plan. The student needs to have a teacher of record that ensures certain standards are being met through this learning. And then previously, the plan and the standards had to go through an approval process that made its way to a group called the K-12 Coordination Council and DPI, and it was a cumbersome process that required almost as much time to get approval as the kids spent doing whatever it was they were doing to learn. I think it was a bit of a roadblock because of the timeline to actually get anybody to participate. And so we changed it this session. Now if your board approves the plan, the kids in, they get credit. You report on it later to DPI. But if you as a board say that the plan and the work experience or the learning experience meets the standards, then they're good to go. So we've simplified that significantly, and hopefully that'll get more students getting credit for some of those great opportunities. So, and then finally, this interim assessment clicker. I do have a red dot. It just doesn't show up. Okay. Interim assessments, and so I won't stand left, so I won't pick on him. But prior to 2019, you were required to do interim assessments. That requirement kind of was paused. We brought it back, so you're required to do, I believe, 2 interim assessments in math and reading. The new piece to that is that the state will provide an interim assessment. If your district wishes to use the state-provided one, you can do so at no cost to you or no cost to the district. If you wish to use a different assessment, perhaps you are already using some type of assessment that matches up with different things that you are doing within your district. So long as that model is on the state-approved list of vendors, you can continue to do that, but then it will be at a cost to the district.
So is this like your STAR testing or
so
what are some examples of assessments?
Kirsten, you want to listen and make sure I don't answer this incorrectly. We're talking about interim assessment. So your interim, state your question again.
I was wondering if it's like the STAR testing, or is it that?
Sure.
Are those examples?
Yeah, and
This is where
I get
I
it.
go sideways
Yeah.
with the acronyms.
Yeah, and if I get too education wonky,
I
let me
screw
know,
up the
okay?
assessment
Yeah.
acronyms. I never can keep them straight.
So, yes, in 2007 or 8-ish, way back when I was with Bismarck Public Schools, the legislature passed a requirement that every school gave the NWEA MAP test at least twice a year, or other state-approved interim assessment. And that's exactly the way the law read. And at that time, there should have been a process put in place that helped the state superintendent create a list of state-approved, if not NWA, because the law said very specifically, NWA, MAP, or other state-approved. So there was no process put in place. And school districts, more than 60% of our school districts use NWEA MAP, but some school districts said, no, we want to do Ames Web, we want to do ACT Aspire, we want to do STARS Renaissance. And so because board members and superintendents don't stand around and sit around reading code all day long, they didn't realize that it needed to be a state approved. So over the course of, 8 to 10 years, school districts just went and chose a different interim assessment to use. And then during the pandemic, so we had realized that at about 2017-18, we being the department, because assessment companies would come and call us up and say, how do we get onto that state approved list? And we were like, there is none. And by that time, the cat was out of the bag. I mean, there was no way we were gonna reel that back in. And so, but it came to our legislators' attention when we didn't take the state test the year of the pandemic in 2020. So they were asking the department for all sorts of information about how are our children doing, how are our students doing that next fall. And we would give them reports and data, but we would always have to say 60% of our schools use this NWEA, but it covers only about 35 to 40% of our students in our schools. And they were like, why is that? Where is the other data? And we said we don't have it because NWEA is the only test that is feeding into our system. And so they were upset about that, the fact that they had a law that had interim tests required and weren't able to get access through the SLDS. So we repealed the law in 2021, and the legislature gave our office the directive to figure out a way to put this genie back in the bottle and make it more control. And so that's what happened in 2023. But while that was happening, so yes, NWEA MAP is one, STARS just got approved, a third one just got approved and I can't remember, but they will come through and there's a very specific process now that says if you are using this, then you can continue to do that. There are lists and they have to submit their data. But here's the important thing for school board members as you budget. At the same time, we have updated our math and English standards and we are having a new state assessment. And this is where if I get too education, please stop me. What we were hearing from teachers is that they couldn't understand why their students weren't doing well on the state test because their NWEA MAP scores said their kids were at 70 and 80 and 85%. Yet, can anybody guess, this is just a quiz, we'll go over this. Anybody guess how many of our students are reading on grade level at third grade? How many third graders are reading at third grade level in the state of North Dakota? Just a wild guess. What would you think?
39%.
You got it. 39%. Most times new board members and parents say 70, 80%, 39%. And so our teachers were like super frustrated. It's like, I don't know what to do. Like I get the NWEA results back in October, and then we do it again in December, and then we do it again in March. And the thing about STARS and NWEA MAP, they're good tests, but they're based on they're both based on the nations, like kind of what is happening in Mississippi, what they're teaching in Mississippi, kind of what they're teaching in Oregon, and even more so, that 80% score on NWEA is a normed score, which means that your child is doing as well as 80% of the nation's kids. It's not how well are they doing against North Dakota's third grade reading standards. So yes, your child, when they get an 80% score, they're doing better, or on average about 80% of the nation. If they're getting 60, they're about 60%. But that's not against how well can they read. And so we developed a new assessment, and we contracted with a new assessment company, and we asked that company as part of our contract to build interim assessments that are directly aligned to North Dakota's standards that will give you a score that tells you how close during the year is that child coming to meeting what we call proficient, meeting on grade level standards on that test they're going to take in April, in the spring. So that test is being piloted this year, those 3 interim assessments. You only have to take 2, but the 3 There are 3 available, and then it's aligned to our state assessment. The legislature said school districts can choose to do whatever they want to do. They can stay with NWEA, they can stay with MAP, they can stay with STARS, they can stay with ACT Aspire. But if you take the state-aligned interim assessment, since the state is already paying for that, you don't have to. So any school district that wants to save some funding and probably help their teachers, you can tell I'm a real fan of this. I get why some may want to stay with NWEA MAP because they have years and years and years of data, but we are working with that company to do an alignment, so you won't have to throw away that 10-year data that you had of trend. You can have it aligned to this new assessment. So the state assessment here, and Stan Schauer will be in to talk to you more about that, but that is being piloted. You will no longer have to pay for NWEA MAP or STARS out of your budgets if you choose the state-aligned interim assessment. The state's going to cover the cost for you.
Okay. Amy, you're up.
Okay, so a couple of changes we made. So the legislature added a change that allows kind of 3 categories of kids to stay enrolled at their current district through virtual instruction through the end of the current school year. Those 3 categories are what we refer to as military connected students. So if they have a parent or a guardian that's in the military and they get relocated for their service, instead of pulling that kid out of their district, essentially mid-year or just before the school year starts, the legislature is allowing that student to remain enrolled in that district through the current school year, through the end of the current school year, through virtual instruction. The other 2 categories are students with medical conditions when they're unable to physically attend school, so they can attend virtually. They might still live in the community, but they can be enrolled through virtual instruction. And then students who move out of state during the school year. So it allows for less disruption, more stability for those categories of students. You have to in order to take advantage of that, it's a board decision, a local decision to allow this in your district. But in order to do it, you have to operate a virtual school or virtual academy. It's not the same type of virtual instruction that you provide when there's weather-related conditions. You have to operate a virtual school or virtual academy, and there's an approval process and requirements that you have to make in order to meet in order to operate a virtual school. But it's some additional flexibility if you have those types of students in your district. They made some changes to the open enrollment process, or at least some changes, and then provided some clarity. So in order to open enroll in a district other than your district of residence, a parent must file an application with the admitting district, so the district that is going to be receiving the student. That was a requirement, but it was kind of buried in the provisions in the code, so they kind of did some reorganization to allow that, to make that more clear. There are a couple of different reasons you can reject an open enrollment application. You can close open enrollment in your district. There are districts in the state that do that. Bismarck Public Schools is one of them. They don't allow open enrollment, just as across the board. You can do that, or if you have open enrollment, there are certain reasons why when you can reject an application. And usually those are going to be related to capacity. They removed class size as one of those reasons. So if you have a 3rd grade student wanting to open enroll, and you have 2 3rd grade classes, you have student to teacher ratios that you want to stick to, and so that student would tip you over that ratio, you can no longer reject the application for class size capacity. So it removes a little bit of flexibility in that regard, but you can still do program, grade level capacity, overall school building capacity are all still acceptable reasons to reject the application. School districts can't deny their students to be admitted into a virtual school or academy. So there was, now that a lot of schools are opening up virtual academies in the state, the legislature wants parents to be able to have some choice where their students go, and so they removed the ability of the home district to deny an open enrollment application to another approved virtual school. And then the other thing, we have the North Dakota Center for Distance Education. It's essentially, my 15-year-old attends CDE. It's the state virtual school, basically. It's been in existence for decades, but their course catalog has expanded greatly, and it's a great option for students. They just changed this now. The home district, the resident district, has to pay the fees for their home student districts to attend CDE. They have to pay those fees. Before, some districts I think were paying those, but it wasn't a requirement. I paid out of pocket for my student to attend CDE, but now home districts are required to pay those fees. So that's a change. Not sure how much impact that will have on particular districts, but it's something to be aware of.
Okay, and then something, oh, that yellow shows up terribly. I am very sorry. It was much more orange on my screen. Something I'm sure that you heard much about in the news, some changes regarding school lunch. The first one, the legislature appropriated $600,000 for free lunch for students at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. So federal government covers free lunch for, Amy, what is the percentage? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't. It's lower than 200 though, isn't it?
Yes, well, yes, it is. So essentially,
I don't remember.
We are filling a gap. The federal government covers free lunch. You have the free and reduced lunches through the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act. I think all school districts, maybe not all, but a large majority of the school districts in North Dakota participate in that. And so the federal government covers free lunch for students at a certain percentage of federal poverty level through that act. Basically, this would expand upon that. So we would be capturing some students with these funds that are missed by that. So $600,000 is not expected to cover all, but just an additional group of students.
Does anybody have any good ideas as far as getting people to apply for it? Because I'm brand new this year, but I've been to one meeting, and this was a topic of conversation, is that we just can't get people to actually apply. Is there an easier way? Is there?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think my last little yellow guy down here is that one of the changes included in a subsequent bill is that a district must adopt policies encouraging families to apply for free or reduced meals. And you're exactly right. In order to receive the benefits through the Richard B. Russell Act, you have to fill out the paperwork. And that is the struggle, right? We have a large number of families, I think, that would qualify, but without filling out the paperwork, we don't know for sure. They don't qualify, they don't receive the benefit. It is perhaps a pride issue, sometimes an involvement issue. We do know something I learned this legislative session. I thought it was always just that the parent had to fill it out. I learned that that's not true. The child can fill the paperwork out. I'm not sure what the secret to success is. I think that's something that we'll be talking about more extensively in light of this requirement and in light of the additional dollars. But I would hope that anyone who has found success in getting folks to regularly sign that up would certainly share out, because I've heard that question a lot, and that was certainly part of the discussion. Would you agree with me throughout the legislative session was, how do we get people to do this? And it was just kind of an ongoing theme of, you were not the only one expressing that sort of frustration or that difficulty. Yeah.
We noticed that too, like it's tough getting people to do that, so we're starting to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
When you have the preschoolers come in and you're starting right away, and you have that in their packets, everything they have to fill out, that's part of it, and they fill it out. And one question they have too is, we have a lot of parents that do qualify, they might jump a lot from job
in
to
order to
job.
even
And it's
afford
kind of
the list.
confusing to them, well, what's my weekly salary, what's my
don't-
monthly salary? Well, I don't know, I made this much last week, this much last month, and it really throws them off. So you try to explain to them too, it's like, no, we're gonna put your best known average that you can and put that down. And it's not too hard to give them examples too on what it looks like.
And
So
we
if
were
somebody-
told too, like, you fill it out and you do low, it's only checked once, so if you qualify now, even if your salary goes up this year, you still get it for the whole year, you don't
Right.
have to reapply till next year.
Yep.
But I do think it's a pride thing, and then also, if I understand correctly, if you apply for that, there's more, you can get more title funding too, if you have more people apply for the lunch thing, are they kind of tied together somehow?
Kirsten, I believe that's correct. I've
Yeah.
heard that from DPI, that we do use those free and reduced lunch numbers to calculate a number of other things on the federal level. You
Yes.
want to elaborate on that?
What's the dollar amount that kicks you out?
I'm gonna answer that. It fluctuates, right,
It
depending
does.
on that federal poverty level.
Right, I will
Um,
give you the exact.
That's-
I'll do, like, it's a certain percentage of, above the poverty, the nation's poverty level, I'm not sure what that is, but I'll find out. But yes, we do use title, we do use the free and reduced lunch, count to report to the feds to determine how much Title I funding we get. There was, our office did look into, some are saying that that's not accurate, particularly in western North Dakota, where there's a lot of high needs, but the salaries are quite high in the oil industry, so that's not a real good disconnect, or it's not a real good connection. We explored this spring, this winter, we started in January, and we ran the numbers because some states use the census, the U.S. Census, to determine the Title I. But we ran the numbers for some of our school districts. Some of our school districts saw real big gains using the census. Some of our school districts saw real declines in their Title I funding. We heard from our Native American leaders that we share our state's boundaries with, that some Native Americans are really reluctant to participate in the census. And so it's not a real accurate number either. So we're really still trying to find our way. But anything that you all can do to make it as easy as possible to have, there's unfortunately, because we're a hardy North Dakota, German, Russian, Scandinavian, there's a little bit of stigma that goes along. So we've worked with the Department of Human Services to eliminate as much paperwork. If they are getting EBT or SNAP, they don't have to apply at the school. That student's address just automatically qualifies them. So any ways that you can think of that would make it easier for us to.
What about Medicaid? Is that an automatic qualifier?
That is, we're working on the
Yeah.
automatic qualifier. Yeah.
And is it,
Maxed out.
can they apply online, or is it only that piece of paper that we put in
They
the
can
news?
apply, online. They can do it in there. In fact, DHS has made it really easy to just one-stop shop for all of the programs. Medicaid, housing assistance, heat and fuel assistance, food assistance, school lunch assistance, all of that. Just fill it in once and then they will help you.
So too, I mean, I like what they're doing with this, the 185 to 200% for the state free side versus the federal side, and that's great, but then it's a 2-year, and it's not even about, and I think that makes it a little more confusing for some, and then, it's nice, but
The implementation and.
it's, yeah.
I think it's 130 and 180 for the, I think 130
It
is
is,
free and 180 is reduced. So I had 130 in my head, but I'm bad at transposing numbers, so I don't ever say them.
So my question is, like, you said kids can fill it out. So what's the audit? Is there any time that they come back and they look, like a kid fills it out, I'm certain, I have 4 boys, they have no idea what
What you
our
make.
income is. Like, I mean, we
You're
aren't
not
expecting
filling
that
it.
kindergartners are figuring out what their parents, tax status is, right? Signing this, like, what does that look like, and what is the requirement for accuracy there?
I'm gonna have Linda come on down. I'll have Linda Schler, our child nutrition director.
there any-
The best child nutrition director in the nation. She will come down.
At like, I mean, just going by the numbers that we were just looking at, like, at 5 kids at 50K, that's a pretty low number of income as, I mean, if you look at today's wages, I mean, you could be at, say, even a $100,000 job and still have trouble paying bills. I mean, is there any way you guys are gonna ever increase that up so that your average class family that are, okay, with the cost of living, everything else went up, well, yeah, maybe I can't afford, but I'm making 120K a year.
So I'll just tell you, we were strong advocates for this, and I'm.
To me,
Yep, and so.
To me, that's at 50 grand for 5 kids, you're really in the poverty level. I
You
mean,
are.
that's Burger King wages.
And your kids are really struggling when they're
Yes.
coming to school because there's.
I mean, if just, you take clothing and shoes and everything that you put
Gas.
with that, I mean, that's,
Yep. I agree. And so I think it's going, again, another reason to be really engaged with your association. Voices like yours really matter to our legislators.
I mean, you take a we're talking 12% increase in inflation, well, I don't see that going up 12% from prior years.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the arguments that the bill sponsors used on this. If we're trying to provide relief to, whether it be property tax, income tax, for the majority of our working families with students in school, this would have done more for putting more money back into the income or into the economy than most of those tax relief bills. So that was one of the arguments or one of this evidence.
Yeah, I was just pulling up just your federal poverty
Yeah.
level, right? And yeah, you're right. At a family of 5, right, not 130 or 180 or 200, from 2022 to 2023, we were at 32,470 to 35,140. So there's some inflation in there, and without doing the math, I mean, I don't know that accounts for
No.
the actual inflation that occurred, especially if you factor in the inflation that occurred across your household expenses,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, but I mean, just take that 50K, divide that by 2 working moms and
Right.
dads. I mean, not everybody's got both mom and dad at home. That's $25,000 a year that's less than Walmart pay. I mean, that's very less than Walmart.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should have free lunch, but in some sense
It's not a
like-
high threshold.
No, it's.
And actually, it came closer than it's ever come before this session, because I would say more of our legislators heard from their constituents living in middle-class middle-class neighborhoods, families that were firefighters and EMTs, and they're like, we cannot do this because for the 2 years that it was provided by the federal funding for COVID, that money was used by that family. And so now to bring that bill back in for $300 a month for children that were in elementary and middle school, it's like, we can't do it. And so I think and that's what made the difference to even get us to this point. So.
Or what do you guys do for the unpaid bills? So you don't pay it?
Good news. Thank you for the segue. So, unpaid bills. The legislature passed a bill. So prior to 2023, your district may have had a policy that included a number of things. You may have, if a student had an unpaid lunch bill, you may have provided them an alternative meal, kind of the infamous cheese sandwich. You may have not allowed them to participate in extracurriculars or asked them to do chores, or, I've heard of stamps on hands to send notes home to mom and dad, things like that. Legislature passed a bill this session, essentially called the no lunch shaming bill, right? We're not going to stigmatize children because their parents are unable to pay their lunch bill. We know that kids can't learn when they're hungry,
It's not the kid's fault,
right?
yeah.
It's not the child's fault. We know that kids can't learn when they're hungry. Our job is to teach them. We're gonna feed them. We're gonna make sure that the child is not stigmatized. So, in the no lunch shaming bill, essentially, you are no longer allowed to provide an alternative meal to students with an unpaid meal balance or without funds to pay for a meal. So you have to give them the same meal that every other child gets. Now, in a district where you maybe have I went to a very small Class B school. I have no idea what it's like to have like a fancy salad bar or the extra a la carte
Yep.
line or all those things. So I don't know what this is like, but this doesn't include that, right? Like when they say you can't give them an alternative meal, they mean they get one pass through the regular hot lunch line like everybody else. You're not obligated to do seconds or the fancy pizza and french fries line. You cannot take away meals from students that have already been served. You cannot identify or stigmatize students with the use of tokens, stickers, stamps, or by placing the child's name on a published list of persons with student meal debt. And you cannot limit a student's participation in any school or extracurricular activity. So you are still able to send those debts to collections if necessary. You know, we recognize that quite often
So,
you're probably not getting that money back at the end of the day. But we heard from a number of districts that found there were families that did have the ability to pay that, and just having the ability to say, hey, we're gonna send this to collections was kind of the kick in the pants for some of those families to go, oh shoot, I forgot to write that check, right? You know your families that are able to pay and are not able to pay, and use that tool accordingly. Question is coming.
no, it's just, I don't understand why the state doesn't just say, okay, we're gonna X amount this much budget. It just provide free, basically paid lunch for everybody, and then just change around and go around, okay, your guys' taxes are gonna go up X%.
Well, so.
And then you just eliminate this heartache on all the schools, because technically you're just saying, okay, you can't shame a kid for paying or not paying. So you're just basically telling the parents, well, let's not pay, and we're just gonna get a big debt for the school. And then you send it to collections, and you're not gonna get your money anyway.
Well, and you know, this
I mean,
is-
I know there's a lot of people that aren't that way to.
Yeah, you're
But-
right, and this is an interesting topic for us as an association every session, because I think we're kind of right there with you, right? Like, we know that the data says kids can't learn when they're hungry, right? And one's a hungry kid, and you know, part of our job is to help advocate on your behalf for things that help you teach kids, right? But we also understand that if we don't have some tools in the toolbox to help us collect those dollars, you may hit a place where you're using general fund dollars, and we have districts that do that. They're chipping away at general fund dollars to cover those lunch bills, right? And it becomes a very interesting discussion, and you know,
So what did you say our school is for reduced lunch?
It's like 60%.
So
it's 60%.
just say
for
you're at
reduced-
60% reduced lunch.
Yeah.
Say they don't fill out the paperwork because
Yeah.
they're afraid of shame or whatever,
Yeah.
you know? And then you take that 60% of your lunch bill, basically, technically could go unpaid,
Mhm.
and then you, like you say, well, you're probably not gonna get the money out of collections. Well, that's a big proportion for your school to eat as a
Yeah.
debt.
Yeah, and
I mean, as a bill in itself.
And a lot of our schools have been very lucky thus far in having angel donors or community organizations, right, that chip in
Yeah.
and cover those. But how long that goes on, or
Yeah,
how long
does
we're
that
that
last?
lucky, I'm not sure, yeah.
So it's not kind of off the topic of, well, still much, but like our general fund pays wages for our cooks.
Yep.
Because we don't have the money. But we have schools in our area that are off, we live next to the reservation, but schools off the reservation, they're able to provide the students with free meals. So, from federal funding. And we're not, because we don't either have enough of a lower income, or they are declined. I'm not sure how they're doing it. I don't understand that, really how that works. So why they're getting free lunches or able to provide free lunches to students, but our small school is not.
Yeah, so there are, and I won't pretend to be an expert, but there are different sort of, I'll just say different rules, different governance structures. When you have schools on or off reservation that may be BIE schools, they function differently, are under a different set of rules than simply public schools that are on or off the reservation. They receive different funding, are governed differently, and so there may be some other source of funding than you would receive simply as a public school that allows them to do that, or some other grant source that allows them to do that. And you as a public school, if you received a grant from, I don't know, the Walton Foundation to fund free lunch for you indefinitely, you could do that. There's no law prohibiting you to do that. Frankly, if you just, I don't know, had an oil well out on the playground and had the money, you could do that. But there's nothing that would prohibit you to do that. It's just that most of our districts don't have the income to be able to do that. So, okay, lunch questions? All right, so that was my last slide on specific topics. Now, we certainly did not cover every bill. I think at one point we were tracking close to 200 bills, right? Mm-hmm. So there were all sorts of impacts that we didn't cover. There are other ways to get that information, but we just kind of wanted to pick and choose a few to talk about today. But, am I at my time? I am at my time, aren't I? Okay, so I'll make this a really quick plug. And Kirsten alluded to it earlier. When we talk about legislative impacts, it is very, very important that you as a school board member be involved in the legislative advocacy that we as North Dakota School Boards Association do. First, it's very helpful for Amy and I. We rely so much on your input during a legislative session to help us understand how these types of things impact the work that you do. But second, legislators care far more to hear from you than they ever do to hear from the hired help, right? They want to hear from you as a fellow elected official far more than they want to hear from me. Your voice is so very, very valuable to the work that we do. But the work that we do does not start on January 4th or 5th of every odd numbered year. The work starts far sooner than that, right? So as a member of the School Boards Association, you play a role in setting our legislative strategy and our advocacy. We have a delegate assembly process that takes place every October at our annual convention. Every school board that is a member gets a number of delegates that gets to come vote for policies and resolutions that are part of our legislative platform, right? Please participate in that process. I want to know that I have a legislative platform that my membership has helped build. Don't, if you don't show up and you don't vote on it, I don't know what I'm working with, right? Or you can't be mad that somebody else showed up and voted on it and approved it if you weren't there. We have committees. I've got a government affairs committee, a legislative committee that helps us work through the legislative session. But more important than either of those things, reach out to your local legislators. Get to know them. Invite them to your board meetings. Invite them to your school district. Start building relationships with them now so that when it comes time for the next legislative session, they know you, they've talked to you, you've built a relationship, and you can go to them with questions, with suggestions. They're familiar with you already. And that does wonders when we're working on things like lunch funding 2 years from now. So, any questions? In the back.
Yeah, one quick one. Can you just go back to that new attendance slide? When you had the home district must pay fees for students to attend CDE, is that on all levels? That's for like whether it's credit recovery class, anything that has to be paid for, period?
I don't think the law provided any restrictions on that. It just said that the home district is now required to pay fees for students their home students who attend CDE. So, that's new. This is brand new, because more students are taking advantage of attending through CDE. So we'll see how this works over the next biennium. But yeah, for now, that it's just straight, you must pay the fees to attend CDE.
So if I have a family come up, like some parents says, I'm gonna have my kid take all CDE classes, I'm gonna pay it, and now that's jumped up quite a bit. I mean, it's closer to about, let's say $230 or whatever it is per class. So I mean, they're taking 4 classes, there's $1,000 right there, and now this kid doing this kid doing it. And then if we go to virtually too, if these kids in my district, like, well, I wanna just go virtually, and we don't provide that, and they go to other districts, and I'm losing out on that too. And it seems like a good way to kill us off, kill off a small community.
You know, I don't know how this works. I'll just, from personal experience, so when I signed my daughter up for CDE, I had to basically file a home education certificate statement with the state. So they're treated as a home education student. So I'm not sure about how the funding works with that, with this new change.
So if you filed homeschool intent, this doesn't apply. So it's only, so you're not paying for homeschool students that are using CDE as their delivery model. This law only applies to students that are enrolled in your school district, and then you collect the base amount of $11,239 for that student. And then that student chooses to take 1 class or 5 classes from the Center for Distance Ed. And so since the Center for Distance Ed is not funded as a school, they are funded somewhat from the state legislature with a budget, but the legislature has said you need to be actually operating a business. And so that's why they charge tuition.
Yep.
And so that school district collects, and on average, most school districts collect $14,000 per student per year. And so the school district collects that $14,000, and then they pay CDE $229 if you're a small school under 1,000 enrollment, or $259 per course. So if that student takes 5 classes, you're looking at $1,150, if I did my math right, maybe. $1,150 that you would pay to CDE for that student, and then collect the $13,000 or the $12,000 remaining.
Yep. And you're right, I understand that, but now I have teachers in my classroom here, and they're teaching English, and I have 15 kids. Well, 10 of those kids want to do CDE. Now that teacher that I'm still paying that full salary for, now she's teaching 5 kids, and I got to find a spot for these other 10 kids. Now do I need another teacher to watch 7 in a different classroom?
And so that's, some school districts now are saying, since we're responsible for them and they're our student, they can take that CDE course, but your attendance policies are your attendance policies. There's no restriction on that. You can say, since we're paying for it, since we are responsible for you being successful because it's going to be on our accountability scores, you still have to come in and take those courses because we need to make sure that you are attending, that you are on track, that you are completing your homework, and that you are paying attention. So your attendance policy, you can let them take that in their home environment, but you don't have to. And so those are some things that that school district policies will need to set out. And I understand that that's the challenge. I was listening to a news show over the weekend, and there may be more and more of that. An English teacher may only be teaching 8 kids. When we have a teacher shortage, is there a way for us to be creative as school districts and say, maybe that English teacher can be in our school district in the morning and in the other school districts, and we can share the cost of that. But there is greater movement in our legislature to say that the state will be funding students' education and not districts. Same thing with higher ed. There's a shift to saying we are funding students' education. We're not funding higher ed institutions. Same thing is trickling down to K-12.
I just, based on his questioning and saying if we have a student that does it full-time CDE, then they have to go through the homeschooling, or at what point would our school be responsible for their bill?
When they enroll in your district as a student.
But can they enroll in our district and then do full-time CDE?
They can, but that doesn't mean that they're educated at home.
No, I get
Right.
that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, if
Yes.
they enroll in our school and then
Yes.
do CDE full-time, we still have to pay their bill.
Yes, because you will still be collecting
Right,
the
right.
14.
That's what I'm saying, we can't deny that they're taking the classes, and if they want to, and if they fail all those classes, we still gotta pay for it too.
And that's why, I mean, school districts should be considering what their parameters are. You are responsible for the success of that student if you are getting state funding and federal funding. And so what will that school district do to ensure that that student is
Well, that's not my
successful?
teacher though, that's CDE.
So-
They're
What's that?
taking that, and
What does
I mean,
it
that kid's
take?
taking the CDE
What's it
class,
take
that's not my
to become a
teacher though.
CDE?
I'm
Where's
responsible
the
for
line
them, but
between
now
CDE
I'm paying for them to go
and
somewhere
homeschool?
else. They're getting educated somewhere else. They're still my student, but that's not my teacher
Correct.
over there.
What's the
It's
difference
just-
between that and homeschooling then?
I don't know, I just think it's a bad bill.
Yeah, and again, the only thing that I'm going
I
to
know,
say
but it's
is,
basically the
it
same
is,
thing, right? Except they're.
as we all know, family choice
I mean, you can't do that in
is
first grade.
elevating. And so there is that definite shift. And to be honest with you,
But like,
if,
say
I'll be
Chelsea gets
honest.
to middle school.
I feel that if that's the shift that we're going to be making, I'd rather have that shift with some, that it's a public school to public school versus
That's
a
fine, just
shift
put the
of public
accountability, and
funds.
the accountability's not there.
What's that? The
That's fine,
accountability
put the
lies,
accountability. There's ways to put that accountability, and then we're doing all these different things, but the accountability is the missing component in a lot of this.
so CDE will be held accountable for their pass rates, like the legislature requires them to report on how many students started and completed.
If that kid fails and everything else, that goes on us, and that we're, our credit, everything else hit on us though. You know what I mean? We have to pay, they go CDE, and they fail, they drop off, that still hits us.
And it hits CDE too, so I think there's,
Correct.
and I
But
think
we don't
that,
have control of that though.
well, I think that's where adults, CDE adults and school district adults need to come together to make sure that, like, what are you doing, what are we doing to make sure
At what age can you start to go on to the CDD?
they do kindergarten through 12th grade?
Oh,
Yeah.
so at what point do you just do CDE and then say, okay, well, I'm just gonna do CDE, but I'm not technically homeschooling, but I'm gonna do it all at home?
So, I think the best person, Kidder County Superintendent Rick Beagle speaks to this really well. And he just says, that may happen where you say 8 kids, but the fact of the matter is, learning is a human experience, it's a human exchange.
Correct, but
And so
I can get
most
my kid done in
parents,
school, in a class, at home in 4 hours versus 8.
but your school district can say, no, that's not the way it's gonna work. If we're paying for it and we're held accountable for it, you're still dropping your kid off every morning, and they'll be doing CDE in our classrooms. Because that's not what this is for. And so the school districts have complete control over their policies on that. And so if they want to finish in 4 instead of 8, then they're homeschooled, and then you don't have responsibility for paying for it.
Yeah, but if you're doing it at home, how do they know that?
But your school can make a
Oh,
policy,
make it
so
so that
if you
they-
say,
Okay, I
if
get
you
what
wanna
you're
be in
saying now.
CDE in our school district, you
have
have
to
to
show
come
up
to the
X amount
school.
of days.
Right,
Yeah.
and if they don't want to, then they would have to apply for the home.
You're
They're
atten-
homeschooled and the parents pay for it.
Right.
Yeah, right, yeah. And so your attendance policies can apply to those CDE students, like, no, you are here. And most, as Rick, as Superintendent Deagle says, most kids aren't going to want to do this, and there's going to be some, maybe one-offs, where they want to take an AP science versus a science. And so, we don't anticipate, I mean, we'll see, as Alexis and Amy said, we'll see where this goes, we'll watch the numbers, the legislature will ask for us to provide that information, we'll see where it goes.
From personal experience, my daughter, she takes, so we have a little bit of a teacher shortage, you know, in our school.
Little bit.
Where are you from?
What?
Where are you
Roulette.
at?
And what she's able to do is take some social studies and as the CDE, and I used to pay for her to do it. Now, since, I guess we're paying for it, but she does it at school, they're required to take it at school. There is a teacher that oversees it, you know, but it's all online. And it's been a great success because she's able to take some of these classes
Better classes.
that we're not able to provide our students and give them a more well-rounded education. And that's helped us.
And that's some of those are some of the examples that we had heard, some of the examples that our legislators had heard. that, to your point, and I understand your struggle about with having an English teacher, but there was, one student that had really capped out. She had the same English teacher from 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and the family had wanted to have her take some advanced English courses, her junior and senior year, and the school district said, no, we've hired an English teacher, you get what you get. And the family was frustrated, and they were not in a financial position, where they could pay. And they saw education as the ticket out for their daughter, and they felt very.
That's where this is supposed to shine.
Yeah.
So the next, I got one more lunch question. So let's say you got a bunch, we live in a smaller community, and we got people that have huge gardens or abundant gardens. Can or can they not donate the food to the school?
Farm to table program, yes, they can. And I'm really, Linda Schler, who is our child nutrition director, is going to come in. She is not in office this morning, but she's on her way. She'll be here as soon as she can.
I mean, we had 60 chickens and we were donating eggs to the school, and she's like, well, we can't really do that.
Huh.
And then she's like, well, then you couldn't, then you could, then you couldn't. I mean,
So we actually wrote a grant to hire an additional person to do specifically to encourage farm to table. So there, as with anything that is government related, there are some steps that need to be, but there's a way, so Linda can answer those questions. Yes.
Okay, so I'm really gonna throw a wrench in things. So I reside about 60 miles south of here, Fort Yates, North Dakota. We have a very unique school district. Previously, we were combined with our BIA school, but now our public school is only 5th through 8th. And I have a son who just recently graduated from 8th grade who does not want to go to the BIE school, but doesn't want to have to travel to Selfridge, the next local public school with a high school, or to Solon. So if he wanted to do CDE, would our school have to pay for him to do that, even though they're currently only doing 5th through 8th grade? Because technically, he is, we are Fort Yates Public School District residents, and that's always been my argument. I was a public school kid, kind of switched back and forth between our BIE, and if I had to choose, I'd send my kid to public school. So that's what I want, but my argument is our little dinky public school, cannot function as just a K through 12 on its own. So would CDE be an option for him as a 9th grader, but would Fort Yates Public have to pick that up?
So yes, you really threw a wrench in it. And Amy, so every K-8 district or every public school district, if they don't have to, or if they don't have a high school, has to be attached to a high school district. So
Which is stupid, which they attach to Standing Rock.
So they do, and I think that might be tribal, so that's where I don't know tribal law, and I don't know the sovereignty of, so first and foremost, what I do know is that Standing Rock High School is a non-public school, so they're not a North Dakota public school.
No.
But I don't know in state law which high school.
It might be, so if Selfridge is their high school district,
Yeah.
I mean, so the law was passed without.
It is Standing Rock, which is dumb because it's like, okay, so your guys are separated, but you're still designating Standing Rock High School as your high school.
I feel like this might be a unique, I think Fort Yates might be unique in this
Did we just
sense.
find like the one?
Because, so, Little Heart, which is the school in St. Anthony, North Dakota has a K-8 school, and because they're K-8, state law says that they have to be attached to a high school district, so they're attached to Mandan. And so if a student, living west of St. Anthony doesn't want to go to Mandan High School, they would enroll in Mandan High School and be able to take Center for Distance Ed. But, as we talked about, Mandan could say that they needed to come in every day anyway. What this law also did, virtual school, is saying that your student could enroll in a virtual academy. So your student could open enroll. So before, the open enrollment law said that it needed to be a contiguous district. It's no longer required for it to be a contiguous district. Your student in Fort Yates could enroll in,
Like Yellowstone's.
but that's K-8.
Oh, it is. That's not a good example. Jeez.
Mandans.
Mandan has a
Oh, yeah,
virtual
Mandan
academy.
has-
Yep. So your student could enroll in Mandan's virtual academy. And
Who
then
would pay
there's,
for that? Fort Yates Public then?
so no, when they open enroll,
Oh, standard.
Mandan collects the $14,000 for your student. And I think Valley City has, we have 6 or 7 public virtual academies where that student can learn at home and be enrolled in a virtual academy.
So, one more question on the CD&E. Is it something that you can do as summer school also,
It's all year round.
all year round? So if I was short some credits, I could, as a student.
They don't really have semesters it's literally just individual student by student,
When you,
whatever works best for
that's
them.
right. When you master what that school or what that course is, the standards, like in 9th grade English, you need to meet these standards. When you mastered and become proficient at those standards, you're done.
And they have 20-week courses. You can finish them in 5 weeks and then move on to the next.
And if you can't finish them in 20, conversely, if you need an extension,
You get extension. You have to pay for it.
Does the school then pay for that extension?
I mean, CDE requires educated students to pay the extension. I'm not sure. I assume so.
and that
At a
is
different
what,
rate.
so we have a guidance document because our principals and superintendents are asking all of these same questions, and so we put out a Q&A. I'll just make sure that in that email, that we will send a link to the Q&A. So the extension, yes, 1 extension is allowed. 1. Okay? All right.